When Man City lost their last game before the World Cup break to Brentford and Arsenal beat Wolves, it was confirmed on that day that Arsenal would be at the top of the Premier League table by Christmas. And not just top of the table, top by 5 points. More often than not, teams who are top by Christmas end up winning the Premier League. So that's surely a good sign for Gunners all around the world. But just wait a minute, how have Arsenal been able to manage this? How have they been able to secure top spot in the Premier League at Christmas after having failed to even secure a top 4 spot in each of the past 6 seasons? In case you don't understand where Arsenal are coming from, let's give you a quick reminder. The Gunners have not lifted the Premier League trophy since they went unbeaten throughout the 2003 to 2004 season. That was 18 years ago. A child who was born when Arsenal last won the league title can now legally vote. That also means that a truckload of legends have joined and left Arsenal without touching a Premier League trophy. Legends like Fabregas, Van Persie, and even Arteta himself spent years at Arsenal but never won the Premier League with them. At some point, the fans even stopped dreaming about it. The measure of success for Arsenal dropped from finishing at the summit of the table to just securing a Champions League spot for the following season. And even that was taken for granted in Arsene Wenger's final few years as boss. But it soon became a cherished memory the Gunners wished to go back to after every subsequent manager after him failed to take them back into the Champions League. At least until this season, when it seems like they'll be getting a lot more than just a top 4 spot. It was really bad for Arsenal for several years. The closest they came to winning the title in the last decade was in 2016 when they finished second to Leicester City. But even then, they weren't that close. Going by the points after the last game of that season, they were closer to 7th place West Ham than Leicester in 1st place. And of course, let's not forget when they sunk to new lows, finishing 8th in back-to-back seasons in 2020 and 2021. You probably get the gist by now. Arsenal were bad for a long time, and to make matters worse, other teams got better. City, Chelsea, Liverpool, they all got better. So with each passing season, it looked more and more improbable that Arsenal would pick back up and actually compete for a league title in the near future, not to talk of actually winning it. But here we are in December 2022, watching Arsenal deservedly sit at the top of the Premier League table with the real chance of actually winning the league. How has that happened? Well, one major factor is the club's patience and trust in the process. The club was patient with and confident in Mikel Arteta, and that combination seems to be yielding results now. Arteta was hired in 2019 with absolutely no experience as a head coach, and in his first season, he finished 8th on the Premier League table. Already fans were screaming Arteta out. The following season didn't really help in his case much, as he finished 8th yet again, outside the European places. But he had a master plan, and if you had looked closely, you'd have seen it. Thankfully, those whose job it is to make the decision saw it. The FA Cup and Community Shield he won in 2020 were indications that he was building something. These trophies didn't just fall in their laps. They beat the likes of Chelsea, Liverpool, and Man City to get there. Then, in his 3rd season in charge of his former club, we began to see Arteta's vision come to life, especially in the second half of the season. After a pretty horrible start to the season, losing to the newcomers Brentford on the first day, Arsenal dragged themselves back up to be in the running for a Champions League place. The football was more entertaining, the cohesion was more visible, and the game plan was more evident. Arsenal were becoming a proper team, but one that was far from finished, and we saw that in the last few games of the 2021 through 2022 Premier League season, when the Gunners had Champions League qualification in their hands, but ended up throwing it all away. The team was on the way back, but some work still had to be done. Some parts had to be discarded and replaced immediately, and Mikel Arteta was not scared to do that. He let go of the likes of Aubameyang and Lacazette and signed Gabriel Jesus in the summer. Now, let's dwell on Jesus for a little bit because he's actually one of the reasons Arsenal are currently dominating the Premier League. He may not be getting a truckload of goals as, say, Haaland, but anybody who watches Arsenal can attest to how important Gabriel Jesus is to the way they play. Even before the season started, we all just knew. We saw how he fit perfectly into the team in the preseason games, and everyone could already tell that Arsenal were going to be really different this season. As many have said, Gabriel Jesus was the missing piece of Mikel Arteta's puzzle, and this is why his injury poses a huge challenge to Arteta. It'll be interesting to see how he navigates that. Now, another reason why Arsenal are on the rise has to be their belief in young talents. The North London club are arguably the club which believes in youngsters the most in the Premier League. They let go of proven strikers like Aubameyang and Lacazette, who are already in their 30s, and replace them with the 25-year-old Gabriel Jesus and the 23-year-old nketiah, who had always been at Arsenal but was then assigned bigger responsibilities. Speaking of responsibilities, they gave the biggest of all to a 24-year-old. Handing the armband to Martin Ødegaard was such a huge call, but with each passing day, it seems to become clearer and clearer that it was the right one. And boy, would it be so fitting if this young Arsenal squad were to win the league and the trophy was hoisted in the air by a man who's the youngster himself. Oh, And let's not forget the likes of Martinelli and Saka, who are basically carrying the team from the flanks at the tender ages of 21. And then there's Ramsdale, the man who from Arsenal took a risk on despite having previously been relegated with 2 different clubs. And of course, we cannot forget to mention that man, William Saliba. He has been an Arsenal player since 2019, but this season he looks like a brand new signing, and a really big one too. If Arsenal would indeed go on and win the Premier League this season, Saliba would be one of the reasons that happened. Without a shadow of a doubt, William Saliba sits comfortably in the list of top 3 best center backs in the Premier League this season. He has been such a rock at the back for Arsenal this season that you may often forget that he's only 21 years old. There's no way you look at the way that lad marshals the backline and think he was born in the 21st century. He's been that brilliant, solid, and incredibly mature. Arsenal have indeed shown tremendous confidence in youth this season. There's literally only one 30-plus player in their first 11, and that is Xhaka. In their entire squad, only 3 when you include Cedric and Mohamed El-Neni. Compare that to Liverpool, who have 5 30-plus players in their first 11, and Chelsea, who have 6. Arsenal may actually go ahead and prove to the world that trust in the youth actually works. And wouldn't we all love to see it? Finally, a big reason Arsenal are currently dominating the Premier League is because they were not afraid to evolve and not afraid to make those tough calls. Arsenal wasn't a club that believed in having technical or sporting directors. As a matter of fact, they didn't have one until 2019 when they hired their former player Edu to occupy that position, and it has proved to be a very smart decision, with the Brazilian being influential in some huge signings the club has made, most notably that of Gabriel Jesus. No wonder he was recently also made the club's first ever sporting director in November. Speaking of tough calls, Arsenal have made their fair share of those in the recent past. Stripping Aubameyang of captaincy was one thing, but terminating the contract of your top scorer and most high-profile player and sending him out of the club mid-season was a really huge call. One many swore Arteta will come to regret, but oh well. Another tough call, letting an experienced goalkeeper like Bernd Leno go and replacing him with a lad who knew more about losing than winning at the time. But Arteta proved that he looks beyond just the stats and the headlines by putting his faith in Aaron Ramsdale. Even other decisions that look insignificant are actually really tough calls when you look at them closely. Calling Saliba back and giving him the responsibility to lead the defense in his very first game with 0 Premier League experience? Surely a tough call. Giving the armband to a player who hadn't played up to 2 full seasons at the club? Really tough call. Even giving Xhaka a second chance was a tough call. But it is all those calls that are helping Arsenal dominate the league right now. And speaking of Xhaka, there are only a few redemption arcs that are as captivating as his this season. This lad was once booed and whistled by the home fans. He once disrespected the fans as the captain of the club and was then stripped of captaincy. Everyone who watched that unfold in real time thought there was no way back for him, but the Swiss midfielder kept his head down and is now one of Arteta's most important soldiers. And oh, he's vice captain now too. No doubt Granit Xhaka, the new Granit Xhaka, is one of the reasons Arsenal are on the rise right now. But which of these factors would you say is most relevant to Arsenal's current dominance? The club's patience with Arteta, Gabriel Jesus, the club's trust in youth, William Saliba, the ability of the club to evolve and make tough calls, or maybe the re-emergence of Granit Xhaka? Let us know in the comments.